Okay, recording is occurring, I believe.
I believe so.
So this is the Land Use Review Board meeting on June 26th, 2025. I am Janet Hurley, the chair of the Land Use Review Board, and I will ask board members to introduce themselves as I see them on the screen. Brooke.
Brooke Dingledine, board member present.
Sarah.
Sarah Had, board member present.
Alex.
Alex Weinhagen, board member. Hello, everyone.
And Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan, board member present. Bear with
Thank
me,
you.
I'm on tech duty today.
I was just going to thank you for being on tech duty. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah. We have one guest here in Montpelier, Thomas Weiss, who just arrived.
Thank
Hello,
you.
everybody.
Hi, Thomas. We have Alex and Nate from DHCD, ACCD, and we have a number of staffers on as well. Okay. Do we have any updates to the agenda from board members? Okay. And Thomas, you're the only public present at the moment. Oh, wait, Brooke.
Sorry, I was trying to click. We're for executive session, are those all the one matter we have listed? Was there another update on any other cases that were going to be added to that?
I don't know. I don't think so. Allison, can you answer that question for Brooke?
Oh,
Sorry, Allison, can you repeat that?
sorry, can you repeat the question?
Brooke is wondering if there is if there is more than just docket number 24 ENV 93 queued up for discussion today in executive session.
There's nothing else that would potentially have any board action at the open meeting.
Okay.
So there's nothing else that needs to be changed on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I think I have the numbers confused. Pardon
Okay.
me. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so no changes to the agenda. We have an opportunity now for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any member of the public present who would like to comment on non-agenda items this afternoon?
I'm relaying for Tom Weiss. He's shaking his head no.
Okay. Any other public comments on non-agenda items or any comments on non-agenda items? Okay, hearing or seeing none, no indication. We will turn it over to, should I turn it over to Alex?
Sure.
Are you the man of the moment here, Alex?
Sure. Well, Nate's the brains of the operation, but for the moment I can speak.
He's shaking his finger, but okay. So go ahead. You have the floor, Alex.
Thanks, Janet. Good to see you again. Good to see everybody. You got your hands full. You're a little busy right now, huh? We're having fun watching you all. I'm sure it's not as much fun on the inside, but thank you for everything you're doing. So what I want to do today is just provide a little context. This isn't going to be a really deep data dive behind the numbers of the housing needs assessment and the appendix to that, which was the housing targets. But this will give you a little bit of the framework of those and sort of the distinction between the housing needs assessment and then the housing targets. It's relevant to you all, of course, because the regional planning commissions are taking these into account in their future land maps, and they're actually part of the process in tracking progress towards these metrics. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to move fairly quickly through this to be respectful of your time. So what I'll say, Madam Chair and board members, please jump in if you want me to stop on something or you want to have a little more discussion on it. We don't need to wait till the end. So please feel free to jump in. Okay. If I can see some nodding heads once you see the screen.
Yes, we
Okay.
see.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to start by laying the groundwork of sort of the layers of data here. And the core of all of this is the housing needs assessment, which we perform every 5 years. And when I say we, I mean the Department of Housing and Community Development. You know what, Janet, I never introduced myself. I'm Alex Farrell. I'm the commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development. We, as sort of the primary initial recipient of most federal housing funds, particularly from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are required to perform a statewide housing needs assessment as are other jurisdictions who receive federal funds. And this is just a general assessment of what does the stock look like now and what are your needs going to be over the next 5 years. So that's a federal requirement, and you're going to hear me really intentionally using a distinction between needs and targets as we go through here. You don't need to know much about this, but just for transparency, we always put out requests for proposals for someone to perform the needs assessment. BHFA, having a very robust data scene and having worked with us in the past, has actually been selected for the past 2 housing needs assessments now, which has really been great. And I'll put a quick plug in here for you all. Every chance I get, I recommend that folks visit housingdata.org. This is a Vermont-specific website. I'm sure a couple of you are already familiar with housingdata.org, but this is the most comprehensive single source of housing data in Vermont, and it's really valuable. So a lot of the data that you're going to see me talk about in here, and I emailed some of your staff the housing needs assessment itself, as well as the targets. Almost all the data that you see in there, you can find on housingdata.org, and it's updated regularly, so you can actually see this live and breathe. I'm going to cover at a very high level some of the key takeaways from the needs assessment, but it's not likely going to be shocking or new for you all, but it does sort of lay the groundwork for how targets were developed. So, you know, we took a look at the makeup, the mix of the housing stock. You can see the pie chart here shows a pretty good sample. Being a rural state, probably not a shock that 2/3 of the housing stock is single family homes. And we have a pretty good slice of homes that are multifamily. You can see there's a split between 2 to 9 unit there and 10 to 50, but construction of multifamily has been increasing at a little bit quicker rate than single family. So the one big key takeaway in here that I want to point to, though, is the age of our housing stock. I'm sure this is something you're all familiar with, but we have very old housing stock compared to the nation. Not unusual for the Northeast, but this, a quarter of our housing stock being built before 1940 is what contributes to so many units falling into disrepair and out of line, offline every year, which is why we're intentionally trying to combat that with programs like the Vermont Housing Improvement Program and trying to redirect as much as we can resources towards bringing neighborhoods back online. The looking forward, the needs were sort of built upon what is the shortage now. So taking a look at what's the vacancy rate statewide, both rental and homeownership vacancy rates, and what should it be. So for a baseline, I'm sure you all are familiar, but a healthy rental vacancy rate is considered 5%, and vacancy rate on the homeownership side, you usually want to see 2 or 3%. But Vermont's rental vacancy rate across the state is 3.2%, was as of the housing needs assessment. That does fluctuate around 3% pretty regularly. But that is thousands of units short. And so our assessment showed that in order to close that gap right now, not looking forward at all, and you'll see more about this in a couple moments, we'd be looking at 7,000 units that would be needed right now, not accounting for any projection. So vacancy rate, what's the rate of homelessness? What's the rate of unit loss, essentially, that we were talking about in that past slide because of the age of homes. And so then on top of those sort of core, those three core items, homelessness, replacing destroyed homes, and then normalized vacancy rates, we start to look at projections. And this is why when you hear us talking about the housing needs assessment, we refer to a range of 24,000 to 36,000 homes statewide is what is needed based on the housing needs assessment on this period 25 through 29. The range is based on population growth, and sort of the low end being, we think we're going to go back to the pre-pandemic levels of lower population growth. The high end being if we were to see that same pandemic era growth. We're going to touch on this more when we get into the targets. But just to start setting the stage, that even the low end would represent almost a doubling of our current rate of housing unit generation. The high end, given that 2024 we produced building permit data, shows just under 2,700 units. We're still looking at a threefold plus increase in production, especially compared to where we have been historically. And on that you can see the period between 2010 and 2020 was a really, really rough patch for Vermont. We were only producing on average 1,200 homes per year. So in part, what we're doing here is making up for decades, especially the most recent decade, of underbuilding here in Vermont. Okay, this was an exercise that I think was really important in setting sort of a baseline for pinning a unit number to healthy vacancy rates, because we talk a lot about, we should have a rental vacancy rate of 5%, we should have a homeowner vacancy rate of 2 or 3%. In establishing these housing needs, some folks at the Agency of Digital Services here at the state worked with our team over at Vermont Housing Finance Agency to try to put a number in each county to what is the deficit, what is the unit deficit, first on homelessness, how many homes would we need to rehouse folks in those counties for homelessness, and then how many homes to normalize the vacancy rate, and to try to start to get a sense of how many homes would get us to that healthy rate. And so 7,200 homes, I referenced this earlier, if we could wave a wand right now, just at this moment in time, not accounting for any population growth or household growth, would have to be over 7,200 homes right now that we're short. So that gives us a good starting point, but it's also a little bit stark. It's a little bit scary. And 700 homes in central Vermont. A lot of us work in central Vermont. 1,700 homes in Chittenden County, just to get us to sort of break even right now. You can see here. I'm going to start talking about production of homes and change in households, but you can just tell looking at the chart that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we were on a trajectory that was really keeping pace with building. And that sort of increase in building, we're actually still living off of largely now. The production in the sort of 70s through the 90s is what we're still living off of now. So we've, over the past 25 years, have just really fallen off. And that's what you can see here is that at a certain point, we just really slowed down for a number of reasons. But again, just trying to compensate for that slowdown. And this is basically just another way to look at that same data. So I'm going to move through here. So I'm transitioning now into talking about the housing targets. And in 2023 with the Home Act, was when the legislature first gave us, the Department of Housing and Community Development, this charge of establishing targets. So not just performing the required housing needs assessment, but actually setting targets. And the legislature was very intentional about using that terminology, not just establishing needs, but trying to drive different outcomes. And not just doing it at the statewide level, but bringing it down to the regional level. That was in the Home Act. And then you can see in Act 181 of 2024, which you're very familiar, this is where they told our team, now you're going to measure progress towards these. And working with the regional planning commissions has been really important in that not only do we need them to bring this data down to the municipal level, but as we work on our data, and which Nate's going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to be measuring progress, we worked closely with the regional planning commissions in sort of ground truthing our data as we develop more systems for more systems beyond just building permits, for actually establishing accurate and very geographically specific data about housing production. Okay, so in complying with the Home Act, we were able to, for the 2025 through 2029 housing needs assessment, work with the regional planning commissions, VHFA, and a couple other parties with the necessary data to add this appendix to the housing needs assessment, which established these housing targets. Targets were set for 2025 through 2030 and 2025 through 2050. The goal here was to recognize that we do need an influx now, and then maybe that curve will have a slightly it'll be less steep moving out for 2030 through 2050. And so we wanted to be able to give regions the ability to look not just at this short term, this 5-year period, but also at a longer period where, sure, maybe we're asking for a real bulk up right now, but then we need just a steady, consistent increasing pace of home building out through 2050. And you're going to see you're going to see lower and upper bounds here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what role those play, but these are essentially scenarios. And so I encourage folks, when you have a chance, flip through the actual housing targets document, because I think it gives you a good sense of what goes into these scenarios. So at a quick glance, the lower scenario, this 27,000 units by 2030 and 79,000 units by 2050, this is what we view as just sort of meeting the need, right? And if you go back and you look at the housing needs assessment, that's just above the low end of the needs in the housing needs assessment. So the low scenario really tries to paint a picture of, if we hit these levels, and I'm going to go back so you can look at your favorite county and try to get a sense of what those levels are. If we hit these levels, what are the outcomes that we're likely to see? We would not expect to see a dramatic improvement in things like vacancy rates. We would not see an opportunity for broadening the labor market, and we would likely continue to see not necessarily outpacing in the way that we want to the rate of homes falling offline due to deconstruction. Whereas contrast that with the upper scenario, where we're pushing for more ambitious targets, of course, but these are the targets that we are really trying to stay focused on: 41,000 new units by 2030 and 170,000 new units by 2050. The reason these are so ambitious is not just to set a high target and hope that we can scare everyone into building at a higher rate. We try to look at shortages in the labor market that have been identified. We tried to understand the the demographic trends with the baby boom generation. We're going to look at that in a minute. And recognizing that we're going to have a significant amount of the housing stock, particularly in the 2030s and 2040s, that are still going to be occupied by folks in the baby boom generation who are not in the labor force. In this period, especially between now and 2030, we need a significant scale up of our housing stock in order to accommodate what we're going to need in the labor market, what we're going to need in order to compensate. And you could think of it as sort of backfilling the population loss that we're going to start to see in the 2040s and 2050s. So that's what we're trying to drive to with that upper bound, the upper scenario. It's not just, I'll repeat this, it is not just setting a really high target just to try to, scare people or push them and hope that we come close. We walk through, but I think it's probably self-explanatory, the opportunity to sort of set midpoint targets. The reason for the explanation of the scenarios, the low bound, the upper bound, is so people can take those outcomes into account as they use these targets for their own purposes. And so coming back here, the reason I focus so much on demographics and trying to drive different outcomes is, you can see, none of us are shocked that our population stagnated for a lot of years, and then during the pandemic we saw tremendous growth. And not going to dive into that too much. I think it's recognized that as the workforce, the national workforce has changed, as opportunities have arisen with remote work, we have a chance in Vermont to increase our population that we haven't had in the past. We've spent a lot of years begging people to move to Vermont. They took us up on that offer, and we were not prepared. Our natural population change that you can see in blue there, which in recent years has started to drop off, that sort of is what it is. It's really hard to reverse natural population change. The birth rate and the death rate are fairly well baked based on your demographics. It takes a long time to reverse those. Net migration, which you see in orange here, carried us during 2022 and 2023 in order to actually outpace the negative trends of the natural population change. The reason all this matters is because it's self-evident. This is something we know, but it bears stating here that net migration is how we can actually change outcomes with policy. And this is why the pandemic was such a good lesson for all of us, that the constraining factor in our population, in growing our population during the pandemic, was not a shortage of people wanting to come to Vermont. It was a shortage in opportunity for them to find a home here. This is, again, just, hey, Brooke.
Hey, Alex, could you go back that one slide? I just had a question. So in terms of the upper or the maximum of the range that you're looking at, and like more post-pandemic or as a result of the pandemic, is that like an average? I mean, 2021 was such a large increase, and then it kind of, is more consistently maybe half of that. Right. How are those figured in terms of kind of setting that maximum expectation?
Yeah. So I would say the upper scenario, similar to what we did with the housing needs assessment, would be trying to not only continue the post-pandemic growth or the pandemic era growth, but that is actually trying to drive growth at those levels or beyond. The idea being, as vacancy rates are higher, you're actually creating more stock and more opportunity for folks to move here. So it's a little bit different take, whereas the housing needs assessment is, what would we need to do to establish healthy vacancy rates with current trends? This is saying, okay, let's use vacancy rates and increase vacancy rates to actually as an incentive for people to come.
Gotcha. So it's not so much like a prediction if things were the status quo, it's also embracing the notion of driving housing, the increase in housing.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Brooke. And that's really what's important about these targets is this is actually us trying to, we're trying to drive a lot of outcomes with this, recognizing that housing is sort of at the core of a lot of this. And this is why, some of the chambers of commerce and some other trade groups provided input that drove some of these numbers.
Alex,
Yeah.
I think part of what you're doing with the targets is trying to attract a workforce that will replace the retiring baby boomers. So it's not just that, people are dying. They're also just before they die retiring. Right? And we need workforce. So it seems like what you're suggesting with the targets is that we need those targets because we need to attract a workforce.
That's the best way to put it, Janet. That's exactly right. I put my foot in my mouth with the governor earlier this morning and said, the baby boomers are killing us. And I looked around the table realizing everyone but me was a baby boomer. I don't mean that. I mean, it's devastating as baby boomers are beginning to retire. And you're exactly right. The Kevin Chu and the Vermont Futures Project has some great graphics on this showing what's happening to our workforce and what's going to happen to it as this bulk of our workforce is retiring and what's going to happen in the next couple of decades. So Janet, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. What we're trying to do is attract folks to Vermont at a higher rate than they have been coming in order to backfill that labor force. And that's really what you're seeing here. Okay, oops, there. Okay, so this is where I think it gets really exciting. I'm going to confess that I hate the number 41,000. I hate having to talk about it. People hear that number and they think, that's absurd. Tell us what's the real number. And what has been so helpful when I go to communities is the fact that our regional planning commissions have taken those high level numbers and brought them down. Since we gave them regional numbers, they brought them down to the municipal level. And they averaged it out for annual figures. So what you're looking at here is Chittenden County's housing targets. And you can see they're using the 2050 targets and they're breaking it out between low, medium, high. I'll just acknowledge that obviously an annual average is going to be more attainable looking at the 2050 targets than looking at the 2030 targets, because what we tried to do in the targets is front load building, try to give sort of increased pace now so that we can catch up and try to reduce the rate of homelessness earlier, and then make sure that there's sort of this ongoing steady growth. But Chittenden County, and I believe the others, chose to use the 2050 targets for an annualized rate, which is fine. So I like to take, let's take Jericho here, and you can start all the way to the left. You can see what their existing stock is. They've got a little over 2,000 units right now. You can see what the total production would be between 25 and 2050 at the low, the medium, and the high range. And then you can see almost all the way to the right there what has been their annual production. And between 2000 and 2023, Jericho is adding 10 units a year. So then if you go all the way to the right where they've annualized the targets, now you can see, okay, what should Jericho be producing at? And if we're trying to stick to that high end, we'd be asking Jericho to do 25 units a year between now and 2050. Again, that is such a more grounded conversation for me to have with Jericho. Can you do 17 or 25 units a year? Rather than, hey, Vermonters, can you do 41,000 units between now and 2030? So this has been really impactful. I'll let you dive into these numbers. I later on, I sent this out, but I want to go to this next slide so you can just see how Chittenden County thought about splitting out the distribution of production using these targets. obviously looking for the cities, our larger cities here, to take on a little bit more. Our rural towns acknowledging that they're more constrained for one reason or another. And then there's a different rate for the mix. Jumping back real quick, you can see that reflected. If you look at Huntington, where their annual range is between 4 and 11, and then South Burlington, where their annual target range is between 152 and 455. But then you can even go and jump up to Burlington and note that South Burlington is being asked to produce at a higher rate than Burlington. A number of factors being taken into account there, including how much opportunity there is for infill in Burlington, whereas there's a lot more opportunity for infill and greenfield development in South Burlington. These are also taken into account, as I said before, in the future land use maps. And each region has taken a slightly different approach. In statute, they have been asked to be able to account for in I'm just going to say broadly, Tier 1A and Tier 1B areas, regions have been asked to account for at least half of housing unit production within those areas, and then the remainder outside of those areas. Thankfully, I'll say from a policy perspective, most regions are aiming for much higher than 50% of that to happen within these areas. And so I think you'll see that reflected in the draft future land use maps, but I believe Chittenden County was intending for, I believe, nearly 90% to happen within those areas, 10% to happen outside, whereas Northwest is targeting a 60-40 split, 60 inside, 40 elsewhere. Again, they took a similar approach in Northwest in terms of how they're displaying for the municipality what they've produced annually in the past, and then what they would be asked to produce based on the targets. And in this case, Northwest is showing the communities both the 5-year targets and the 25-year targets. Again, I'll let you look at these numbers on your own later. And we have Rutland in here. The fun thing about Rutland is they said only people with 20/20 vision are allowed to see our numbers. It's the teeniest, tiniest font ever. So I've tried to blow it up as much as possible here. So it takes up 3 slides. So when you go back and you look later, don't feel bad if you're struggling to see. I had to blow it up as big as I can. But again, it's the same logic here. Okay, so I'm going to transition over to Nate here. But this is what I find to be the most exciting, and where we've come a really long way in terms of housing data and how we're able to track production. Historically, we've had to rely on building permit data from that gets reported up to the U.S. Census Bureau. Sarah, Alec, I mean, really everyone here has some understanding that that's not going to always be a reliable source, especially if you're looking statewide. We knew it's directionally accurate, but not granular. Thanks to the AI team at the Agency of Digital Services, Vermont Center for Geographic Information, the E911 board, a lot of folks, and Vermont Tax, the RPCs, a lot of folks coming together to bring overlaying data sets that Nate will talk about more. We now have some of the most granular looks at housing starts and where homes are being produced, so that we can actually give really good and detailed information about how we're doing in reaching these targets. So anyway, Nate, why don't I give it to you?
Yeah, sure. For those that don't know me, I'm Nate Formulari. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Housing and Community Development. And maybe we'll let Kristen ask a question before I do my quick. I know we're getting close to our time too, so I'll be quick.
Just very quickly, I would anticipate this is capturing the ADU units, like
It is, yes.
Under the category of other or single family, maybe, like.
I'll have to get back to you exactly on that.
Yeah.
But I know
Okay.
it is. I know it's capturing them because that is the highest growth area on this dashboard right now is ADUs.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So as Alex mentioned, you know, in Act 181, the legislature said now you need to track this. There was no statewide comprehensive tracking going on. Some of the regional planning commissions were literally going into town offices to find purchase and sales and building permits, and then driving somewhere to see if a house was built. So this dashboard is still young and still new. It's not perfect, but we, as Alex mentioned, we worked with VCGI and a bunch of different partners to put this together. And it is live and totally, we're doing the slide now because demos always fail, but it relies on E911 sites. So when someone's going to build a house, they get an E911 dot. It's called a development site at first. And then once the house is built, it's switched to an E911 site. So this dashboard, you can zoom in and out and see where houses are being built. The E911 data is refreshed weekly, and the E911 board, and it automates right into this dashboard. And the E911 board has been very good about updating some of their forms so that we're starting to get a better picture of number of units, year built, and things like that, where before it was just a dot with not much data associated. So they've been willing to add fields, and we're able to update this on a weekly basis. As I mentioned, it's a work in progress, and a kind of a housing data council has formed around this thing that includes DHCD, tax department, VCGI, the RPCs, the E911 board, where we're trying to find the statewide standards so that we're all measuring this in a similar way and from a single source of information. So it's like I said, it's new, but it displays the targets. You can toggle to different counties. And then you can also talk, once the municipal numbers are all in from the RPCs, you'll be able to go to each town. I think another exciting thing about this is, as you guys are thinking about, you know, as RPCs are thinking about where are these houses going to go to meet these targets, and you folks are thinking about tiered boundaries, we can start to put overlay on this map to say, you know, where are things happening? Are they happening in tier 1A and 1B? Are they not? Do we need to make policy changes based on what we're seeing? It's not the realest of time, but it's pretty real time. And then the last thing I'll just say is this session that housing data group worked hard to get a piece of language into some legislation into the housing bill so that the tax department will now have direct access to computer assisted mass appraisal data, or CAMA data. And we're still, the law, you know, it starts July 1st. So we're still figuring out how that's all going to work. But the idea is that appraisal data is going to have a far more rich set of data that we can pull and bring into the back end of this dashboard as well. So that's to come, but we're really excited about that opportunity. And tax, it's data that already exists. The municipalities have it, but the tax department wasn't able to plug into that software. And this legislation now allows that to happen. So that'll at least be an annual update that can complement the E911 stuff that's kind of coming in weekly. So that's the really fast overview. We're really excited about it. I think it's kind of a first of its kind, and it's been really encouraging that all these different parties want to come to the table to create one standard instead of trying to do 5 different things.
Talking to my colleagues in other states, I believe this is the only statewide dashboard of its kind, especially in real time, and utilizing AI so that we can bring in various sources to verify each other and then deduplicate the data means that we're getting richer and richer data basically every time we can bring in a new source.
And the final thing I'll say is VCGI being an open source entity, everything they do is open source. People can actually zoom in and click on a dot, and if it's wrong, there's an email, and you can email and say, hey, this isn't right. It's actually an ADU, or it's actually a multifamily. The unit number's wrong. So we're very open to, we realize this isn't perfect, and we're very open to trying to perfect it over a long period of time to make sure it's accurate. And this will be the basis. We now will have to report annually to the legislature to say, here's the targets and here's how we progress towards them. And that'll be an annual report.
Any questions for DHCD by the board? Any questions from anybody?
Tom Weiss has a
Sarah.
question.
Oh, Tom.
Hi, this is Thomas Weiss in Montpelier, and I have a question on the housing construction numbers. The housing needs report is based on permits, which to me, I believe omits a lot of construction in towns that don't require permits or areas. So I'm wondering if you have an idea of how the permit data compares to the E911 data on the dashboard.
Yeah, that's certainly, we're trying to do a retrospective to see to see how far off that is. And there's another piece, there's a timing piece to this where we can see what was permitted in a given year, whereas this dashboard is trying to capture what's actually coming online. And so that's slightly different in terms of timing. What we can say is the building permits have been directionally accurate and are not, dramatically off, but we feel like this data source is at least heading towards being more accurate and more timing accurate as well in terms of showing us what's coming online in real time. Nate, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we were looking to move, not everything that gets permitted gets built. So
Yeah.
we were trying to figure out a way to be a little bit more accurate. And if this can actually start to plug in a forward-looking pipeline, that could be helpful too. Another thing we're looking at with this dashboard is one thing we do know with certainty is all the public funded housing projects out there. So can we start to plug those in to say, this will be online by 2028 or something like that. So that's kind of where we're hoping to head with this. So it's a more of a forward-looking tool as well.
Annette?
I have a basic question that I am sure you can't answer, but I want to ask it anyway, because I've been listening to this conversation about how we need to build houses, let's grow houses, whatever. And I don't understand how giving a town a quota results in getting houses built. There's some connection there that nobody's talking about. And I mean, my town struggles with roads and culverts and so what is there a strategy in place for actually taking these needs assessments and turning it into actual building?
Yes. But like with anything, it's a direct link, but divided by policy. So these are intended to inform policy on a couple of different levels. So municipalities, these are not a quota. There's no penalty for not achieving these. We're trying to give municipalities the data to understand if they were to say update zoning, update bylaws, what should they be aiming for? And literally look around at opportunities for building and on what scale should they be thinking. So this is supposed to give communities a direction to think about that exactly. So what scale? So what do they need? Do they need to update their zoning? The reason it looks back at their average annual production of the past is so that they can get a sense of to what extent they need to upzone or create new opportunities. And then more directly, and the reason we're sharing this with the Land Use Review Board is the regional planning commissions have been asked in statute to take these into account in the future land use mapping and essentially help municipalities drive housing production. It's so really anytime we're talking land use and housing policy, we're creating conditions to enable that production. At the end of the day, that's all we can do as policymakers. We can't physically build or fund all of those units. What we can do is create conditions under which it's likely that those will get built. But thank you, Annette. That's a really, really spot on question.
Sarah?
Thank you. Amazing. I have three things. The first is I'd love to see updates on this to the LURB, hopefully continued conversations, opportunities for you to come back, present the information, particularly as this gets added to, and we can sort of check in with the metrics and see how we're doing. I like the idea of using this as a way to sort of calculate and adjust. I think also fascinating details in terms of our natural replacement and the fact that just because of our demographics that we're not naturally replacing ourselves as quickly as we should, and we're relying upon that net migration to add to the workforce. So I think you hit on fantastic presentation, a lot of information in a short period of time. Exciting. I remember when the Department of Health used to track some of these numbers. I think this is a great new tool. A couple of things that might be interesting to see in terms of also making adjustments. ACCD has a powerhouse of information. You have people that submit to you bylaws and updates. So to get to some of the questions asked, I think you could at some point using AI or somehow extrapolate the influx of like bylaw modernization projects. How many of those towns, and highlight they're seeing maybe some of that new increased production had a bylaw modernization within the past 2 to 3 years. So in terms of how is this, to Annette's question, impacting what we're seeing in terms of development? I think just another interesting thing that the LURB's examining is the impact of appeals. And it goes to that sort of disjointed, how many are permitted versus how many get built. I think that there's also some information that could be added in and maybe even spatially represented in terms of where are we seeing appeals within these areas that might be just helpful in terms of another metric to take a look at. I know I love the data, so I'm going to ask for more metrics, but I think that that is very useful to have these policy conversations. And I look forward to more informed conversations in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That's exactly, I mean, that's one of the reasons we're here is for you all to ask us to layer on some more, whatever more data we think can help us make informed decisions, both at our level, the town level, and at your level. We want to hear that. I love that you brought up, layering on some of the zoning and where folks have done bylaw modernization and zoning updates. If you go to the site where this is hosted, you can also, one of the tabs shows you the zoning atlas. And so we are working with the team to try to see how those two things can, more of these data layers does make these move a little slower, but we are trying to add more. One layer that Nate was successful in working with the team to have added recently is just showing where the interim exemptions are. And so just an overlay, just a geographic overlay. So you'll see data points that aren't restricted to the period in which the interim exemptions were in place. And like you all probably know, it's unlikely that the interim exemptions have really influenced that much home building yet because of the long tail on development. It's, at least 3 years. So, but it's just interesting to see how much historically was already built in those areas and to contemplate what could that look like in the future. Appeals, that is such a cool idea, Sarah. Thank you for that. I want to dive into that more.
Alex, and I just want to note that we are coming on 10 minutes over time on this agenda item. But Alex and then Brooke.
Janet, affordability. I know we talk about it, but you didn't mention it much in your presentation. How does that factor into sort of the 40,000 foot overview of these housing needs assessments?
It is very much discussed in the housing needs assessment. It is a core aspect of it. I didn't cover it today because I'm thinking more the land use level, but I mean, it's inseparable from this discussion. So thank you, Alex. It's really crucial.
Just one quick thing I might note, Alex, on not the housing needs assessment, but the housing targets. Got a lot of numbers out there, but on the targets, those actually envision the second home rate staying at what it is, the short-term rental market staying at what it is, seasonal, the hunting camps. So those numbers you see on the target slides are actually taking into account that the percentages we're at now are going to stay consistent. So for every 100 houses built, 10 will be second homes.
And actually, one of the things that the regional plans have to do is break down those targets in terms of price point and type of housing as well. So, hey, Brooke.
Yeah, I just want to express some concern that I am not certain what some of the language that's being thrown around really means. And what I'm really want to focus on are terminology like modernizing bylaws or updating them. I don't know what that means. And so while I hear there's a need to drive housing development and encourage it, but we don't have money or incentives or government agencies that are going to actually build the housing, I just want to better understand what the lingo means in terms of, modernizing, because that to me is ill-defined and I don't understand, other than eliminating regulation, what it could possibly be defined as.
So can we invite the department back to talk about the bylaw modernization program and put that off for a next visit, Brooke?
Absolutely. I just wanted
I
to
have some
raise the
questions too.
concern that I wasn't exactly sure, and would love
Yeah.
more information. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Good point. Did somebody else have something? I thought I heard somebody say something.
That was
Kirsten.
me. I was just gonna say, I have some questions too. I would love another visit if Alex and Nate have bandwidth.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay, well, we will talk about that offline, getting you back, okay?
Thank you all. It was good to talk to you.
Thanks for everything you guys
Thanks.
are doing. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Too. Thanks
you.
for coming.
All right, bye-bye.
Operations, budget, and legislative updates. I don't think there's anything on legislative.
Yeah, I could not much by way of legislative. We are it's sort of operational, but related to legislative. We are just assessing in light of Act 51, the open meeting law changes. Just assessing the processes that we're using at the district commission level for their minutes and agenda for those meetings and making sure we're in conformance there. So just wanted to let you all know that is in process. And I think last time we talked about S127, it has an act number now. It's 69, just so you know. So that's the only legislative. So nothing critical there on that front. Budget, we are at year end. So Rachel is busy working away on cleaning up those year end processes, seeing where we ended the year in terms of the budget. I'll just mention lastly that we're working on in terms of operations side of things, and also in terms of cleanup, looking back at our current commission lists and where we have existing vacancies and expirations of persons' terms, and just following up with the governor's office on that. Been working on that for a while. They've done a number of different appointments, but there are still some that are pending out there. So yeah, those are kind of the main updates in terms of budgets, operations, and legislative, but happy to entertain any questions there or other items that folks wanted to talk about.
Seeing none, unless there is public comment on that, I would like to move on just to sort of make up some lost time. Is that okay? Okay, studies and reports. I will start just to give a brief update. The Regional Planning Commission application guidelines are nearing a draft form that will be shared out publicly. We are also working on forms for comments that we would be taking in from not only our state partners, but also any public commentators or anyone who wants to comment on a regional plan when it comes to us in that pre-application phase. We're also working on developing an application form And we are also working on developing an objectors forum because there's now this new procedure and statute that outlines how someone can come to us with objections to a regional plan having been adopted. Then let's see. Let's move on to Tier 1A. Sarah, do you have any brief updates for Tier 1A?
I'll keep it brief. So Tier 1A, I had asked for a public comment on framework. Last week, we got a few stragglers at the beginning of this week. It's great. I'm hoping to summarize within the next couple weeks and get a summarized response out. But I just wanted to sort of publicly say that this was a framework designed for a very initial conversation. And a lot of the wordsmithing, the timing, that's all stuff that is going to be coming later in guidance. This was not a guidance document. The regional plan and what we've been going through with that reiterative process is very good. It's a very thorough process, and we will be going through that with Tier 1A and hope to build off of that success from the regional plans and try and make sure that we're using a lot of the same language. We are referring to statute. So just that's where we're at, and I think it will make it a lot stronger, and I very much appreciate everybody that took the time to provide feedback. Thank you.
Brooke, can we get an update on appeals?
Yes, we had our fourth stakeholder meeting on Monday at Vermont State College in Randolph. And had a little bit of technical challenges starting the meeting, but by the end we did finally get them all resolved. But folks were incredibly patient, and we really appreciated their cooperation. Not that they had any choice in the matter, but we really did get into a great discussion about the 3 proposed board models after VNRC's John Groveman gave a presentation of his ideas, and then had a discussion about some key issues. So the plan is to have the board, it's on the board's agenda for Monday, to go over a discussion of where we're at so that we can give some thought to how to move forward. The stakeholders wish to continue to be engaged as we refine and flesh out a board award models to be able to ultimately consider and make recommendations for or against in terms of the court versus the transition to a board ultimate determination. So, and I issued some detailed notes about what happened at the stakeholder meeting. We wanted to be sure, because of the technical difficulties, that we did have the information in written form so folks understood the topics that were discussed. And I am updating the summary to date kind of comprehensive document that details the process that we've gone through so that the board will have all the information together, so that I know you folks have reviewed a lot of things at different times, but this way it gives you the information to date in a more comprehensive fashion to make sure that if you wanted to reference something or review something before our initial discussion on Monday's board meeting, you would have it at hand.
Hey, Brooke. Alex.
Right. So I do have an update on Tier 3. It's not the one I wanted to give you, but the delay that I've been whining about for the last couple meetings has snowballed a bit further as of today. And it's logical, but our GIS gurus at the Agency of Digital Services are busy, and there's a July 4th holiday coming. So the work that we were very close to concluding, they're going to need until the week after the 4th to finish in terms of the GIS analysis and the update of the online map viewer. And I can't re-engage the stakeholders until that map viewer is updated, because the stakeholders need something to look at. And I can't bring this first draft to all of you until that's happened as well. So with that said, progress, but slower than anticipated. The upshot is that I think at this point it's likely that the pre-programmed Tier 3 stakeholder meeting for July 15th is going to be the meeting where the stakeholders get to see the first draft. It was supposed to be, sooner than that, but I think that's when it's going to happen, which means all of you are going to get to see the first draft after that, likely July 24th, which was supposed to be our first public meeting in Rutland, to have the public weigh in on this first draft. So I think we're going to have to move that public meeting into August, and we can do that. We have time. I had built in Slack in August because it's a difficult time of the year to get people because they're on vacation and such. But if we have to do that, we can, and that's the continued saga of some delay on the Tier 3 rulemaking. What I can tell you, just to tease you a little bit, is that I have a first draft, hooray, and the work that particularly Eric Engstrom at ADS, the GIS guru, and Bob Zano from Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and what we've been doing, I think, has come to a really good place. And so I'm really interested to get the input from the full stakeholder group and from all of you, but it's just getting it in a format that everyone's going to be able to understand and look at is what's taking longer. As far as criterion 8C, no real update. Like I mentioned previously, we're supposed to have that group convened by July 1st, and I think we'll miss that date by maybe a week or so, as I'm reaching out to folks now, and I anticipate bringing you a list of proposed stakeholders probably in the week after the holiday, after July 4th, so that you can all bless it, and then I can reach back out to all of them with their marching orders. We don't actually, on our time horizon, we don't actually have that stakeholder group starting their work until the end of September. So we'd like to meet the statutory deadline to convene that group, but I'm not worried about the timing for that rulemaking effort because, like I said, the stakeholder group, it doesn't start really cogitating on it until the end of September.
Okay, any questions about our reports? Okay, we will now look at the recommended wood products manufacturers report. Do you want to share a screen, Kirsten, or would you rather someone else do that?
I think it might be smoother technology if someone else can readily do that.
Okay, I have it
Better.
open, so I can do
Okay.
that.
That would actually be great.
Okay,
The lone laptop was acting up a little bit, and I've just got the one going.
so do people see the draft report version 4 here?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so do you want to go ahead and give an overview of how this draft is any different, Kirsten?
Sure. So, since this was discussed, most recently with the board last week, I have received, comments from one other stakeholder group participant, the zoning administrator representative, who checked in to say he sort of had a quick look at it, looked fine, but wanted to emphasize the importance of a permit specialist role as a live person. So that's the extent of additional feedback that was received before the end of the timeframe that was set. You've already seen the comments received from FPR and BNRC. So this draft 4 represents the board's prior consideration of those comments and the board's input. While we're paused on this first page, I'll mention that the item 1, which includes a reference to Stony Brook, has now been finalized in consultation with legal. So I think that's a little bit of refinement occurred there. And there's one sentence that I added that is in, I guess, keep going, and it'll jump out to me. I know Sarah mentioned that she found time to look at this and had noted the additional sentence. It just highlights something that VNRC had suggested be clarified about the survey results, that the survey was, reflects feedback from, a wide range of Act 250 project categories, and is not limited to wood products manufacturers. So that was made a little bit more clear. I think it's, yeah. So there's that information, but I think further down, maybe on the next page. Sarah, feel free to jump in too. So at the second sentence on the page that you're on is explicitly recognizing that it was sent to a list of wood products manufacturer Act 250 application contacts, but no responses were received. And so then the background information was expanded to include additional targeted meetings and phone interviews with the wood products manufacturing sector to basically make up for the fact that we didn't have surveys from that demographic of applicants. So that's one sentence that was added. Brooke?
I was just curious if we wanted to quantify how many folks it was sent to.
We could. I would have to verify that with FPR. It was FPR that had transmitted the survey to that list. And I believe I have that data, but I would have to verify that the spreadsheet of that information aligns with their transmittal of the survey. And I couldn't, guarantee, when we might be able to get that verification from FPR. So I'd be happy to include it, but
are you asking how many wood products manufacturing permittees it was sent to specifically?
Yeah, I just thought
Okay.
we're saying it was transmitted to some identified list. It sounds a little bit cryptic. Is my only reaction, like, well, did we send it to 10 people or 200?
Definitely not 200 because there weren't that many WPN.
Right.
I know.
There were only
And
14.
And that's one of the issues is just it's such small sample sizes, in this in this grouping or industry. So it just sounds a little funny, like you sent out surveys and nobody responded. Well, it's a small group, is kind of the point, very few folks. But
I would support rewording this.
Do you have
why is it all by itself instead of within a paragraph somewhere? Can it be part of or maybe it should be footnoted since it
could be
produced nothing. So maybe it can be footnoted on the next sentence.
Yes, that would be a good place to put it in a footnote, I think.
And if you could footnote it and provide the number to which it was sent.
I will do my best to verify the number, but that will involve FPR replying to confirm that information. And I can't guarantee that, what the timeliness of that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
then let's just say, I would say, let's just footnote it and say, it was transmitted to, wood product manufacturer Act 250 application contacts. And maybe you can just add, of which there were only 14 between 2017 and now.
You could put in
Just
there
to,
FPR, where, you know, that it was performed by FPR.
oh, right. Oh, right. And then, yeah, how about just that? The Department of Forest Parks and Recreation sent the survey to wood products manufacturer application contacts, but received no responses, period. And I don't think you need the IE. It's just redundant.
Okay.
Yeah, with that change, I'm fine. I don't think you need to worry then about the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. Alex.
So yeah, I just want to second that. We're at the end of the process. I don't think we need Kirsten to go chasing after numbers from
Right.
FPR. But Kirsten, can you clarify for me? This was done by FPR, but the surveying was the survey chronologically, was it sent to the wood product manufacturers first and then sent to a sample of all Act 250 applicants, or was the order the reverse of that, or do you not know?
Oh, no, I do know. The sequence was that the survey was transmitted by me, by the board, directly to the quote unquote all categories of applicants and it was actually like individual transmittals with links to the application from the database, before FPR later transmitted it directly to the identified list of wood products manufacturers.
Okay. And then,
Yeah.
so that's helpful. And I think the suggested language change that Janet and Brooke were talking about will be good on that front. Janet, can you scroll up to the page 4? The paragraph that starts the survey section says that the survey was transmitted to 186 contacts for sampled Act 250 applications. I guess I stumbled over that sentence. I'm sorry. What for sampled Act 250 applications means? Is
Well,
it
so the
really
second
just trying to
sentence
say
that
the survey was
describes-
transmitted to 186 contacts representing a broad range of project types?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we could strike the language in parenthesis if that would make it sort of simpler and more readable and understandable, like.
No, it's fine. I just needed to clarify it in my head. If I was going to strike anything, it would be the phrase for sampled Act 250 applications. That's, I think, extraneous, but I don't want to quibble with it. I think that's fine. Let's move on.
Okay. So this will be footnoted on the first sentence of the next paragraph. And other changes, Kirsten?
Yeah, so if you keep going, there's another footnote in section 5 concerning the item dealing with updates to Rule 19, right? So the footnote on this page, which, you know, I just was unsure if this approach made sense given the comments received. So I'm not sure if it's, you know, if it's sort of a level of detail that the board thinks might, you know, go beyond what's needed.
I think it's okay. The sentence says that there were some concerns, and this just explains where those concerns came from. Alex.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a guy who's ready to go along with this so we can get it done. But when I first read this, actually had the opposite reaction, Janet. I was thinking, it's great that VNRC had a specific point, but I'm sure lots of stakeholders had specific points that were raised at one time or another. Not sure that it's necessary that this one get this much airtime in a footnote, but I'm happy either way. I'm not gonna stand in the way of progress here.
Yeah, and I'm happy, like, it's fine to omit it. I tend to agree with you, Alex, as far as like there was a range. And this was a bit of a placeholder in response to the comment.
Right, VNRC gave some comment and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, all things
Brooke,
being equal, I would just delete it, but go either way is fine with me.
Okay.
Brooke,
I like it, but I'm not gonna wrestle anybody about it. I think it is well articulated in this footnote. That's all.
yeah, and really, I'm with Alex about it's not important enough to hold up approval of the document, I think. Sarah.
I was just going to also echo Alex in terms of not going cool about leaving it at this point. So just
Okay.
for my 2 cents.
Okay, so we're gonna leave that in.
Here's a thought. It could be pared down and just reference made to the letter that's on the database.
I think it's fine the way it is, and I'm gonna let Annette ask a question or make a comment.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in here and say I read VNRC's comments. I thought they were very good, and that particular one is one that stood out to me as really being important. There's so much effort to make all these things rebuttable, and I would support leaving it in.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Kirsten. More changes?
I think that's it. At the last meeting, we went over the revised conclusion.
Okay.
And, I know, there's the red line strikeout content that we had gone over at the last meeting that encompasses the revised conclusion as well. But I feel like this is a good place to pause and maybe go over the conclusion one more time.
I have a question. It looks like all we have on page 17 is a note.
I know.
Oh, well. That's okay.
I tried, but I didn't try hard to get it on.
Do you think that should really be a page, or should it be an unnumbered page? And it should be a 16-page
oh, yes.
report.
Yeah.
So change that to page 16 of 16. Yeah. That will change all the 17s to 16, and then make this a new section that doesn't have a page number.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on the conclusion?
Nope, and I'm happy to offer a motion if Kirsten thinks it's ripe or the chair thinks it's ripe.
I think
there's a question from Tom Weiss.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Hello, this is Thomas Weiss again, and I acknowledge that I am extremely late in coming to this set of comments. I agree with the VNRC comments on the ancillary permits. But I'm also concerned that the next two recommendations, 5 and 6, also give away some of the board's or supervisory authority over permits. And had I gotten into this earlier, I would recommend that they be removed. 5 has to do with allowing the district coordinator to issue administrative amendments for projects that likely will impact the environment. And the other one is
Put it up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, Thomas.
no, I'm trying to, I wasn't reading from my script. For mine to read. And the other one is the allowing changes that improve the project, which is number 5. But a change that improves the project in one criteria might impact the environment in another. And the example given in the report is diesel generators for 3-phase power. You remove the impacts of the diesel generator, but there are also effects on bringing the 3-phase power into the site that I think also should be investigated before granting this authority to issue a permit solely on improving conditions for the situation on one criterion.
So Thomas, thank you for those comments. And I think at this juncture, we can note them here. If we pursue rule changes, those that procedure to change rules will involve public input and comment. And
Yeah.
can you put a pin in
And
it? And we'll put a pin in it too.
And I acknowledge if I'd done this 2 drafts ago, it would have been more meaningful.
Thanks. Alex.
You stole my thunder, Janet. I was gonna tell Thomas the same thing, that be advised that these 2 recommendations are for the board to pursue rule updates, which is an extensive process. So lots more opportunity to have discussions about this. It's not a foregone conclusion that these changes will be made, but we will pursue the review of them.
Okay, thanks. Any other? Go ahead.
I'll just reiterate my offer. If you think it's ripe, I'm ready to make a motion on this.
Yeah, I think it is, so long as we have no further public comment. And I don't see any hands going up or hear any voices. So, Alex, you have a motion?
Yeah, so I'll move that the board approve the wood products manufacturers report as drafted and discussed today.
I'll second.
Okay, and just for clarification's purpose, we discussed footnoting one particular line concerning surveys that were issued by FPR to WPM. And that's the only change that we are including in this draft, or from what you see as draft 4. And so we're
There's a
approving
little page numbering maybe, and that
that's
sort of thing.
that page numbering thing too. Okay, yeah. So 2 little changes are part of this motion to approve draft 4. And Sarah, you seconded. Any further discussion?
I thought we did another line of wordsmithing, just so that whatever changes we made today is the subject of the motion, Alex.
Correct. Yeah, I agree, Brooke.
Cool.
I think the footnoting that Janet mentioned also involved a little bit of language change to that section.
Yeah.
I don't think we
Correct.
need, I don't think we need to quibble over what we already talked about, and I trust Kirsten to make the changes pursuant to our conversation.
Right. And our AI generated minutes will help.
I trust Kirsten way more than the AI, but
You
okay.
do? Okay. Okay. So
So,
let's take a vote.
bet-
Oh, Kirsten.
I have a discussion, sort of a related detail would be, I think we need to have a cover letter, transmittal, or some, just simple, polite, dear legislature, here's the report as required. And is that something that Janet, you would draft and include?
I think let's finish the motion on the table here, and then let's discuss that after. So
Okay.
will all those in favor of this motion, all those board members, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
That is unanimous. We have a wood products manufacturers report. It's our first
Yay.
product.
Congratulations. 4 days early.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody, but
Kirsten.
especially
Thanks,
Kirsten.
everybody.
So briefly, yes, I think it should be transmitted with a letter. Pete, were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, I was gonna, once you guys finish your vote, just say that there's a process for legislative report, and I'm happy to help make that happen, and go through that process for you all. But yeah, and I think I'm happy to draft up a cover letter that goes with that, and get that off to the proper folks.
Kirsten, so you'll have the minor changes by Monday, and perhaps we can send it with a cover letter by Monday. Do you think, Pete, you have time to draft a letter by Monday?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have
Thank
the
you.
changes tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thanks. Alex.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Pete, for helping with that administrative side of things. And I, as one board member, am happy to have the cover letter, to the extent it needs to be signed by somebody, be signed by Pete, as it's simply referring to an action that the board, took, and he's our executive director. Or Pete can draft it and Kirsten can sign it as the lead board member on this particular project, recognizing that as important as you are, Janet, each of us, takes leadership roles on projects, and Kirsten is definitely the leader on this one. So either way is fine with me.
I like that idea.
Happy to have
I
Pete
would be
and
happy to
Kirsten
sign a
work that
letter
out.
if that's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oops, shoot. Okay, and go back to our agenda. And we are 1 minute ahead of schedule. How'd that happen? So discussion on rules of procedure. Would you like me to share screen with that very preliminary draft?
Could we talk a little bit about it first so we can all see each other before we just start
Sure.
diving into text?
Sure. Yes.
So go ahead, Janet.
I was just going to say, I reviewed the very preliminary draft this morning, and what I would suggest is that the section on board removal should be at the end. It just let's put all the good stuff first and leave that, for something that we only will ever have to scroll there if things get terrible for some reason, but to have our meeting procedures and all of that, come before that. Sarah.
So I just, first of all, want to acknowledge Rebecca's work on this. We were going into overtime, 10th inning on regional plans, and we asked her to pull this out and revive it and keep it going. And I think what she was trying to get us today was we asked her to prioritize that and get it in, which she did, and it's phenomenal. I so appreciate like how she was able to thread everything together. My goodness, that's just sort of reiterates we have the A team, and so appreciate that work. If you take a look at the rules of procedure towards the end, you still have in there the Water Resources Board. So I know why she did it at the beginning. I think there is a logical at the end. And I think that today it was just so we could start to have that conversation, focus on sort of more of the larger, like coming together of some of these issues, and not necessarily get too far into the weeds in terms of wordsmithing. But I would agree with Janet. I think the reason why it wound up at the beginning was because she got through most of it, but not that tail end part, and that there's some reordering to be done and what have you. But just it's a lot, and I very much appreciate her sort of reviving all this so we can have the discussion today.
Alex.
Yeah, always thank you to the people who help us with our work, and that's Rebecca on this one. So thank you. I do think this is a very preliminary draft. I think it has a long ways to go, and it really helped to look at it for me though, to get a feel for what the original document was doing and like what aspects of the former board's work it was talking about. And I think it might be helpful, at least for my brain, if at some point we have a little bit more discussion about what sections need to be in this document. And because I'm not sure that the original document that this was based on includes the appropriate sections that we might want a document like this to address. And it's hard for Rebecca to just, invent something out of whole cloth, with the exception of our removal, because that's, we have to do that per statute, if we don't give her some direction on what sections we think need to be addressed, and potentially sections that aren't in the original document. But beyond that comment, I think I have enough specific comments on what Rebecca did do that I don't really want to try to do them all today. I think it might be more beneficial if we picked a section, one, that we might want to take up on any given meeting like today, and just focus on that. And then we save the next another section for another meeting, and assume that this will take several meetings to sort of polish.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I would save most, certainly formatting and editorial kinds of comments for much later, much later, because as some of us have learned through developing the guidelines for the regional plan applications, it's all going to change. Word choices and format and organization of it will change. But that I think, yes, deciding what needs to be in this document and in terms of sections and what they cover. One section that is in there is the meeting, how we conduct meetings. And we did previously discuss this a little bit, and as I recall, we decided not to refer to Robert's Rules of Order at all, and just say how we're going to conduct our meetings. So I'm just saying that as a reminder, because in the very preliminary draft that we see, there's still a reference to Robert's Rules, and we do want to take that out. Even Robert's Rules for small bodies. Sarah.
So I think that, again, Rebecca did a good job of pulling in what we had for past documents. And you're right, we did have a discussion subsequently after that. And I think the other thing that sort of come up that you made a note of, or I saw you made a note of, was now we're going to have hearings to review regional plans. And that's another area that we need to sort of address, is that sort of new hearing process, if you would. So that's again, I think it's a good starting point, and I think to Alex's part too is, we looked at this and could we just do a strike all and replace? It would take more time. And this is actually the easier road to do, is to take the existing and weave the changes into it. So it's not quite as clean, but there's a reason why we're doing it this way. And I understand, I appreciate that element to it.
Thanks. Okay, anything else from any board members? Alex?
Do we want to, per my prior suggestion, do we want to talk briefly about what sections might be missing or what sections don't need to be in this document? And do we have time to maybe pick one section that is in this document and go into it in some depth?
Let me just look at the agenda.
Yeah, how much time do we have allotted to this, Jen?
We had half an hour and we've used 7 minutes. So I think we could, Alex.
Yeah, I guess the section for me that I'm that I'd be prepared to talk about specifically would be the board removal section. That's been on my mind, not because I want you to remove me, but just because it's a unique system, and so I think we have to kind of invent it. So I'd be willing to maybe focus the rest of our discussion on that if the rest of you are game.
Brooke?
Yeah, I think that the approach of sitting down and talking about things from a conceptual standpoint makes more sense to me than starting to chop up this document into piecemeal kinds of parts, because part of my frustration is now we have all of this red line strikeout, 5 pages of stuff about removing ourselves. And we didn't even have a conversation about what kind of process do we want to contemplate? What are the options? How deep in the, now we're talking about disciplinary proceedings, not just removal for cause. And to understand better, what's the authority? How does it normally get exercised in the state of Vermont? I know we're kind of unique because we're like this self-selecting board or self-firing board, but I feel like this is a lot of resources being put into something, and we haven't even had those conceptual meetings of the mind. So from my perspective, I would like a more overall, all right, and to understand what's supposed to be in rules, what's okay to be in policy, what's the difference between a policy and a guideline, what needs to be where in all of this, because we have other guidelines that I'm working on, and it's kind of like, I feel like we need an overall master list of all the things, including, updating the substantive rules, and where does all of this stuff go? We have this other utility procedural document about being a quasi-judicial board in that setting and I don't know whether that's been incorporated here. So I appreciate all of the time and effort on this, but I feel like it's a little bit premature. And now it puts us in the position of already talking about the weeds when we haven't really set the stage.
So, Brooke, the adding the quasi-judicial sorts of processes that we have with the regional plans and with the PSD appeals, I thought should be added to this. And I think we did talk about this. We talked about it when we first had that discussion of Robert's rules. And we did talk also about the proposed, or I wouldn't even call them proposed yet, but what we did is we took the Green Mountain Board's draft removal rules and we discussed them at a meeting. And I think what Sarah was just saying is, in talking with Rebecca, she made it clear to us that revising the rule that we have, and I'm just going to share the screen quickly. So we currently have this rules of procedure document that supposedly applies to us. And yet it's completely outdated because it refers to the water resources and the land use panels of the previous board. And so it seems that, you know, there's been a long neglect in terms of keeping these kinds of things up to date for the Natural Resources Board and now us. And since this was in rules previously, I think it's appropriate to keep it there and to update it so that it's relevant to us. And I don't feel like it's premature for rules of procedure to be I don't think it's premature to discuss at this point. So, and I do think that the way that we conduct our meetings, the way that we conduct the quasi-judicial hearings that we will be conducting, and the removal procedures are all appropriate for this particular document. Alex.
So, again, my proposal for the rest of our minutes today is perhaps we could have some of that conceptual discussion that Brooke is asking for, but perhaps we could do it in the context of one section of the document without really looking at that section, but just have that help us focus our attention. And my suggestion was, let's have that conceptual conversation about removal of board members. That's just one section I think we could talk about. What I would say to your point, Janet, is I agree that the rules of procedure document should address how we run our meetings and how we run them differently, potentially for quasi-judicial functions. However, my understanding is that the statute tells us that we do not need to have rules regarding how we deal with regional plan adoption and tier 1A approval, and that those could be guidelines. And I think they should be guidelines. I think these rules should talk more generally about how we conduct a quasi-judicial meeting or session, but not talk about what we would be doing in a quasi-judicial function. Because
absolutely, Alex. I think that the idea is to outline that we have different kinds of meetings. One is a quasi-judicial. Yeah. And the guidelines, as you will see shortly for the regional plan applications, are guidelines, and they go into that. So
we're on the same page then. But I do like Brooke's idea of having some conceptual discussion. I just want to focus it, actually, since we probably only have, 11 minutes left.
No, we have 16.
16. I'm just proposing, could we focus that conceptual discussion on how we remove ourselves? And then we can do conceptual discussion on other sections of this report at future meetings.
So I think I would rather put that off too, because I don't know that I guess we did. I don't know that we saw this in enough time in advance to do that. We did discuss the rules of procedure once before, and just as we discussed, the removal rules before, and just as we made decisions about Robert's rules, I think we also decided as a board that we would like to see a unanimous decision before somebody is removed. And so I think we should put that back into the picture, and that's not reflected in this draft thus far. I think there's still I don't know. I guess we could do that. I don't how do
those
others
are the kinds
feel
of
ready
conceptual comments that I think would be helpful right now.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, why limit it to that then?
Because we only have 14 minutes left, and there's enough to talk about there.
Okay. Sarah.
I agree with Alex. I think we've talked about the board removal procedure process before, and I have some conceptual feedback to provide. I think in terms of moving that forward. I was familiar with that section, got through it. Would love to discuss it a bit. If now's the time.
And Kirsten, are you good with that?
I'm fine with discussing that now.
Okay. Brooke?
I mean, this isn't gonna be the be all end all,
No, this is
final,
like-
just,
This is
Yeah.
a very rough draft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to have the document shared, honestly. I think Brooke's
Okay.
suggestion was, let's talk, conceptually about things and, right,
Okay.
Brooke? So, yeah, Sarah, what did you, I have a few things. Janet stole one of mine. Thanks, Janet, because that unanimous thing was one I wanted to remind Rebecca about
Yeah.
since we had spoken of it earlier.
So maybe I'll steal one of yours too. I apologize if I did. But I think there's the about board removal, about the refusal, failure, or inability to perform his or her duties at the board, for example, missing 3 board meetings without notice. I think we should give some parameters. Is that 3 board meetings over 3 years, 3 consecutive, or 3 within a time period? And then I think the other thing too is if you read through our existing procedural rules, we're very good in terms of not engendering it. And I would like to see instead of his or her there,
Yeah.
with this new section if possible.
You stole one of mine, Sarah. Okay. Thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a couple, but Brooke, do you want to go first?
I'm not prepared to pick this apart item by item. I was thinking more on a conceptual level and really understanding more about the jurisdiction that we have vis-a-vis being told that we have the authority to remove members for cause, because there's an awful lot besides just that function in these rules. So I'm trying to understand where we get the authority to start disciplining people and doing other kinds of sanctions against them besides just saying you're fired.
Yeah.
That was one of mine, Brooke, too, actually. I really wanted to understand what functions of the state of Vermont's HR policies and protocols we don't have to regurgitate in these rules, or we just absolutely should not try to regurgitate because we're bound by those. And I don't know the answer to that either. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to ask our legal staff to go research that, or our leadership team to go research that and come back to us. So I think that's a really good question. One of my other sort of, I think of as conceptual sort of, but substantive questions about this is, obviously when this unfortunate incident happens, hopefully it never will, there's a complaint, right? And the complaint has to go to someone, and then there has to be some look at it to understand whether it's substantive and deserves to be followed up on. And if I remember from our prior conversations, I don't know, we're a small board. It felt like it shouldn't, maybe I'm mischaracterizing our prior conversations. I'll just say how I feel. I feel like it shouldn't be hidden behind 1 or 2 board members who will decide whether it's actionable. And then the other board members, the other 2 who are not the subject of the complaint, but are still board members, are sort of in the dark, and have no input into that. It feels like it should be a more collaborative issue of like, hey, this came up, and hey, you are the subject of this, Alex, if it were a complaint against me, the rest of us are going to have a look at this, and we'll let you know if we think it's actionable. I just feel like it should be more like that, and less like it's the chair and the longest serving member or whoever. So I don't know conceptually if that collaborative, everybody all together philosophy is what other board members think is appropriate for this policy or rule.
I think you're right, Alex. I think we did talk about that during the previous discussion. Sarah.
Yeah, I thought that was another good one too, is the interesting thing is it's the longest tenured and we're all the same tenure. So that's a little bit of a little obstacle to get over at some point. I think just to sort of recap and perhaps have a refresher, because I know our legal team did dig into this and like, what do other boards do? And some of the other boards that are in the same boat as us have not gotten across the finish line yet on adopting these types of rules, which we're required to do. So
That's right, and that's a good point that Rebecca did look into this, and the Green Mountain Care Board has not adopted these yet. And I think if Rebecca's here, maybe she can give a report on it. We had asked Rebecca to look into that, and Rebecca, are you here?
I'm here. Good
Yeah.
afternoon. Yeah, so what Janet said is correct. I did look to see if these had ever been adopted into law, and they have not yet. So that this is the draft by the Green Mountain Care Board. And then the other board that is similar to ours is the Cannabis Control Board. And I didn't find anything relating to their removal rules. A lot of times removal sits with the governor. It doesn't stay with the board. So we're very unique in what this is and coming up. But I can continue to see if I can find other examples.
And I think that's a good point that Brooke had about, the statutory charge was to have rules of removal and not necessarily disciplinary actions. And so maybe, Rebecca, you can look into that and see whether, the implications are that is there some reason that they should be in there if our charge does not mention discipline? Maybe
that's a
they
good
shouldn't
point.
be. Yeah.
Right.
Brooke,
And just on that note, there may be a very good reason. If you have the authority to fire somebody, well, you have the authority to do something lesser. Okay. But, I mean, the notion, it's just hard to look at a fully baked cake here, even though it's a rough draft and all, because I would prefer, like Rebecca, to go through the document, at least from a sectional standpoint, and say, this is some draft language that I got from this board in Vermont. We copied that. It's not ready to be, because here's the problem. Because we have to operate in this silo type fashion, there's all this information that the board member who works on a particular item knows a lot about, but that information is not effectively shared with the rest of the group necessarily. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, this should be a group project and a group conversation about concepts, composition, structure of what's in the board rules, what's in these procedural rules, what do we do, guidelines, policies. And I still go back to that because when I was working on the appeals stuff and then I was looking at open meeting law provisions, I am very confused. I am trying to determine what is proper for rules, policy, and other kinds of guidance documents. And that I would like, if we could get legal to really clarify that for us so that we understand what should be in under which kind of definition. I know I'm sort of going back over this again. I don't mean to be a pest about it, but I really feel like, this is not I think this should be, it seems appropriate to be in this kind of document, because there are legal qualifications, if you will, for a thing to be in a certain category. And then there are certain legal import to that categorization is what I'm getting at. So I just feel like, making sure that we understand let's outline what we want in here before we're trying to pick apart whether or not our general counsel is going to be a prosecutor against our board members. It's like, well, I'm not really in favor of that. I don't think that would be good for our program. But it's like, to pick apart little pieces and parts here, it's like, it's just hard because we have already started with something that's in existence. You know what I'm saying? not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to have a better idea of how this whole thing is supposed to come together.
So, Brooke, you're asking whether indeed some of these meeting procedure kinds of things should be in rules versus guidelines versus some other category, right? We know
Yeah,
that they,
I want to make sure we're putting it in the right bucket is all,
Yeah.
because like right now, I'm working on internal guidelines and when does the board, is the, what factors do we use to settle a case? What process do we go by? So what's that? I'm writing as a guideline, but now I'm hearing, well, maybe it should be over here in the actual rule, silo or bucket, right?
yeah,
And so all I'm getting at is I would like to have a better comprehensive knowledge of all the stuff that we have to do in terms of rules, guidance, policies, and put them in those lists to say this is where it's going to go, so that we're not, I mean, a lot of this is a quasi judicial function with all this removal and the hearings and all of that for our own board members. So that's quasi judicial. Should we have when we act as a quasi judicial board, we have a particular set of rules that covers the utility thing, the removal of us, all that kind of thing. That's all I'm looking for is more organization so that I understand where all the pieces are going.
yeah. And I think that that's sort of what we as a board, when we've talked about these before, has struggled with a little bit. But I think it's true. We need to figure out which bucket they go in. And I thought that we had sort of moved toward putting the rules of procedure in this bucket. And I would say that there hasn't been a lot of work on this since we discussed it as a board. And I would say we had two separate discussions, one on rules of procedure and one on removal rules. And all that's happened in between is that Sarah and I asked Rebecca to sort of put it together so that it could come back before the board so that we are making some kind of forward movement on it. So I don't think it's the case that there's been a lot of discussion about this outside of open meeting by any board members. And Rebecca did share with Sarah and me, as Sarah pointed out, that if we want to jettison the rules of procedure that I just put up on screen previously that have basically nothing to do with how we function as a board anymore, and we have to adopt rules of removal, that it would make sense to do that together in that document because of just efficiency, right, Rebecca? Because the procedures around modifying or revising rules are much more efficient or easier to attain than through the procedure to start new, right?
I think the way to think about it is like the rules of procedure, like it is valid law that exists right now. And so if we don't amend it, we have to repeal it. And so then we would be doing a two-step process where we'd be repealing, so just getting rid of these all together and then creating a new document. So you'd be doing two rulemakings instead of one. So that's why it's just efficiency, right? If that's where it's easier just to like get rid of them and start again, we can do it. But that was how I tried to explain it, is because you can't just say they're not valid anymore. We actually would have to go through repealing, which goes through all the, so it's just.
And I think Allison informed me that there is no substantive update or what that we need for executive session. So we could jettison our executive session today unless there's something that I don't know about that needs executive session. And we could continue talking about this for a little bit. We are now 1 minute over on this topic, but we could take more time. And maybe we should, just to give at least Rebecca some guidance as to where we intend to go with this at this point. Sarah.
I was going to offer that perhaps this could be a legal training session for the board. As long as we don't make any decisions in it, where our attorneys could provide us some background about the procedural rules. We could go over what we have. They could go over the proposed changes with us. As long as we're not making any decisions, so that we have more of that sort of one-on-one. To Brooke's point about being able to ask questions and get a little bit more detail so that we're more fully informed in the decision-making process, that might, I think, perhaps be helpful and better inform us, so that when we're here having a session, we can all feel a little bit more comfortable about them and speak to them and have an informed conversation, if that is helpful.
Alex?
Yeah, you stole my thunder, Sarah. I was thinking the exact same thing, that I think per Brooks' comment, what we want is a training session on the difference between guidelines, policies, and rules, together with enough information about our own organization to know like what types of things would need to be settled in those three buckets. You know, there's meeting procedure, there's removal of a board member, there's XYZ. And because like Brooke, I'm willing to pretend like I know the difference between guidelines, policies, and rules enough to move forward. But what I feel really uncomfortable is that I haven't been part of this program long enough to know what are all the things that need to go into one of those three buckets, both based on our existing rules and guidance documents and, you know, how we're operating today. And I wonder if we put this off for a little bit, if our staff, our leadership team and support staff could design a training to talk about both items, you know, the three buckets, as well as the types of things that might already be in those buckets or might need to be added to them.
So I think part of what we will find is that it's going to be up to the board as to what it wants to go through the rulemaking process for, except for those things that we were directed to put through the rulemaking process. And so I would just warn us that if we're going to have that training, that we then can't have the conversation as to what we want to put in what bucket. Because I think it's a board decision in the end to put it in this bucket or that bucket. It's not that there are certain things that need to be, you know, in one of those particular buckets, except for those things that the legislature has directed must be in rules.
I agree with that, but we do have we have some training materials and some like refresher materials. Where Rebecca did the rulemaking training, we can recirculate that, and we also have some APA training materials. But yeah, happy to do a refresher on that if that would be helpful. Sounds like it might be.
Allison, have you given us, and I've just forgotten, some document that provides a list of all of our adopted rules, policies, and guidelines?
They are all on our website, so I can send that link to you. I can direct you to that page. There's 3 rules documents: the rules of procedure, the Act 250 rules, and we have an environmental citations rule. That's just discrete area of enforcement. And then we have an index of our different procedures and guidance documents that is also on the website, and by law required to put that on our website for different procedures and guidance documents that we want to rely on.
And
So
I'm gonna share my screen and show that.
Yeah, I'm looking
So-
at the page. Thanks for the reference, Allison.
So this is the page for statute rules, guidance, procedures, and this is the index. And it's like an Excel file that lists guidance and procedures on various topics.
So Allison, is it your understanding then that in terms of these buckets, that in fact there are only two? The bucket for rules and the bucket for guidance or procedure, that there isn't a third one for policy or
this is
something?
coming up this week. Yeah, I mean, there's not a definition for the term policy in the Administrative Procedures Act. It's procedures and guidance and rule are defined terms in there, and I believe practice as well. So there is a range of different names that are slapped on these different documents. Mainly it's, at least the more recent ones, are the guidance and procedures. I guess we're saying guidelines and some other terminology, but those are the main things that are defined in the APA. So that's what I'd
Okay.
recommend using going forward.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list and I'm just thinking, some of these are highly specific to a criteria, for example, in the Act 250 review protocol, and others are not that specific. And I don't know what the rest of the board members feel, but I feel like what we're talking about and trying to move towards are updating rules and guidance on the more general front, not on specific criteria for Act 250 review. We'll do that later. I want to do that later, but not right now. And I guess I'll just give myself the homework assignment to look through this list and try to pluck out the ones that are more general, that might be worth us thinking about now versus later.
Sure, and we're happy to, I don't know, make some proposals about these and other areas. That'd be great to have some board policy on as we move forward. But I know you got your plates full. But
One that we adopted, environmental justice complaint intake procedure. But I noticed this does use a lot of different words: policy, guidelines, guidance, program, procedure. Yeah. Policy, guidance. So, okay, Brooke.
So to change the subject back to executive session, I understood that there was a court order on one of our cases this week. And was wondering if we could get an update on how that remand is being handled in executive session.
Okay, Kirsten, is that your hand or Thomas's hand?
It's my hand. It's a simple question for Rebecca about the rulemaking training, if I may.
Go ahead.
Rebecca, maybe you could just jog my memory. When you did the rulemaking training, I remember it was very comprehensive, and I'll look back to it. But I'm wondering, did you cover guidelines and procedures within that training? Like, is there some content there that helps explain the difference?
There
To
is,
then allow.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's okay. Oops.
Yeah, so the training did really focus on rulemaking because we have to go through it in so many instances, and it goes through like the forms and but it did talk about procedures and guidelines in it, but it doesn't go in as much,
As much detail.
right? Because it is
Yeah.
luckily, or just a simpler process to go through, right? You don't need to go through different committees for approval, right, before that they become the force of law. Because procedures are not, right? They are just,
Well, I feel like it would be
Adopted
worth having.
policy.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like it'd be worth having a conversation and maybe a training about those tools as well and how we as a board, would undertake that. I'm sort of envisioning that maybe there are some things that involve both rulemaking and guidance. I think we've talked a few times about different things that we would envision probably starting as guidance, but then maybe after time, once we've refined it, it becomes a rule. That would be sort of like the conceptual plan. But maybe even from the onset, there are things that, okay, well, this content is sufficiently nailed down. This is the level of detail that everyone's comfortable with putting, forward into a rule. But then there's some related guidance that is, allows more flexibility to adapt as circumstances warrant. So yeah, I agree with what Brooke is saying as far as like big picture. And I do think we should just walk through, kind of map out, okay, which one of those things alongside, what we have already touched on, like what are the other things that we should be, looking ahead, thinking about getting into doing some updates on.
So we're over time on this topic, and Brooke had put forth that she would like to get an update on something. Brooke, do you want to make a motion?
Sure.
And I think we're decided without a motion that we will pursue having our legal team give us some more instruction on this matter, and then having further conversations in open meeting about how to go about this this exercise and establishing rules for meetings and other things. So
Can I go ahead?
yeah.
Okay, I found the script. I would like to discuss a pending Act 250 appeal matter, and to have confidential attorney-client communications on the matter. Therefore, I move that we find that premature public knowledge would place the board at a substantial disadvantage, and that the board enter executive session.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I'll just say I don't anticipate that the board will come out of executive session with any decisions. In case, I think we'll just come out of executive session and probably adjourn, just to forewarn anybody that doesn't want to hang out for any kind of concluding decision. So all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
And that's unanimous. So the board will enter executive session and return to this meeting after the conclusion of that executive session. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Tom.
Good to be here. I didn't expect you to be here. I thought this was going to be closer to you in St. Louisbury today. Sarah had mentioned that.
Elaine. I think I'm gonna have to call in.
So Thomas, Kirsten, you are looking at the notice that says we're in executive session, correct?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Great.
I'm gonna
thanks.
call in. I'm gonna
Yeah.
call in to the other meeting.
Okay.
Just because of how my computer is working here, so just,
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'm leaving the room.
oh, Tom, you're leaving anyway?
I'm leaving anyway.
Make sure to mute the microphone or leave the room, Kirsten. I'm gonna leave this room.
That door's heavy, you want a hand?
Can I go around the other way?
No, there's like a
It's
table.
not all
blocking
open
it.
yet.
Okay, so I am gonna leave the room, but let me just. It's because I have to use my personal cell for laptop.
You're muted, Janet.
Yeah, recording is still going. So we are good to go. Who are we missing? Anybody? No, we're all here. Okay. We have nothing to report out of executive session. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Brooke.
I'll
Sarah, you
second.
were muted. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And was that a yes, Kirsten? An aye from you? So I think it was unanimous. Okay. So see you all soon. Thank you.